My wife fired me from her company. She turned pale when the board announced my new position. My decision is final, Daniel. Clear your office before security has to do it for you. My wife said those words in front of 11 people. Not in our kitchen. Not behind the closed door of her office. Not somewhere private, where 9 years of marriage might have earned me the dignity of being humiliated without an audience. She fired me in the executive conference room of Whitmore Systems at 9:17 on a Monday morning. Outside the floor-to-ceiling windows, Manhattan disappeared behind sheets of November rain. Inside, the polished walnut table reflected cold white ceiling lights and 11 uncomfortable faces. Claire Whitmore sat at the head of the table. My wife, my CEO, and apparently, as of that morning, neither for much longer. A cream-colored termination folder rested in front of me. Daniel Rieves, Director of Systems Architecture Employment Separation. I stared at my name. Then at Claire's left hand. Her wedding ring was gone. That hurt more than the folder. Effective when? I asked. Claire seemed surprised by how calmly I said it. Immediately. Beside her sat Victor Lang, Whitmore's Chief Strategy Officer. Victor had been with the company for 8 months. I had been there for 9 years. He wore a navy Brioni suit, a silver watch that probably cost more than my first car, and the small, satisfied smile of a man who believed he had just won something. This is restructuring, Daniel, Victor said. I turned toward him. Did I ask you? His smile vanished. Claire's eyes hardened. This attitude is part of the problem. What attitude? The constant resentment. I almost laughed. Resentment. You behave as though this company owes you something. The room went quiet. Martin Hale, our CFO, lowered his eyes. He knew. Everyone who had been around long enough knew. When Claire inherited Whitmore Systems from her father, it had been a 40-person software company with outdated products and 6 months of cash left. Claire had inherited the name. I had helped rebuild almost everything underneath it. Back then, there had been no marble lobby. No private elevator. No. Assistants waiting outside glass offices with tablets in their hands. There had been old carpet, flickering fluorescent lights, a coffee machine that worked only when someone kicked it, and a server room that overheated every July. Claire had been 28. Terrified, though she would never admit it. Her father had died suddenly, leaving behind a company that looked respectable from the outside and was rotting from the inside. She had come home the night after the funeral, sat on our kitchen floor in a black dress, and whispered, I don't know how to save it. I had sat beside her. You don't have to know everything. She had looked at me with swollen eyes. What if I fail? Then we fail together. She kissed me after that. Not passionately, gratefully, like I had handed her something to stand on. For the next 3 years, I did everything I could to make those words true. I wrote code at 2 in the morning. I slept beneath my desk during product launches. I personally repaired a server failure on the morning of our wedding anniversary because losing that client would have meant missing payroll. When investors refused to take Claire seriously, I sat beside her and rewrote every technical presentation until she could walk into those rooms without fear. I trained sales teams, built deployment systems, interviewed engineers, designed the platform that eventually became the backbone of Whitmore's growth. Then a Silicon Valley company offered me triple my salary and stock that could have changed my life. Claire cried when I showed her the offer. If you leave now, I don't know if I can do this. So I stayed. Not because Whitmore Systems was my dream, because Claire was. Years later, the company employed more than 4,000 people. Claire appeared on magazine covers. Business publications called her one of the most dynamic CEOs under 40. At conferences, people lined up to shake her hand. She learned how to enter a room and make people turn. I was proud of her. At first, whenever reporters asked about Whitmore's turnaround, she talked about leadership, vision, courage, resilience. Never about the man who had helped build the machine beneath the story. I told myself that was fine. Marriage was not supposed to be a competition. Then she stopped introducing me as her husband. At investor dinners, I became Daniel from engineering. At galas, I was seated 3 tables away because Claire said she needed to sit with important people. She started correcting my clothes before events. That jacket is too old. Those shoes look tired. Can't you at least look like you belong next to me? I laughed the first few times. Then I stopped. The worst part was not the criticism. It was how natural it became. How easily she began talking to me like I was an employee she tolerated. Then Victor arrived. He was everything Claire had started believing success should look like. Loud, polished, photogenic. He spoke in sentences that sounded expensive without meaning very much. He came from a consulting firm and had built his career around words like transformation, optimization, scalability. Within 2 months, he had convinced Claire that engineering was too internally focused. Within 4, he was attending meetings I used to attend. Within 6, he was traveling with Claire. By month 8, my wife had stopped wearing her ring to work, and now she was firing me. Claire pushed the folder toward me. The company has outgrown your way of thinking. I looked at her. My way of thinking built the platform generating 38% of your revenue. Victor sighed. There it is again. There what is? The martyr complex. A few people shifted in their chairs. I turned back to Claire. Is this your decision? She hesitated for perhaps half a second. That was enough. Yes. Not Victor's. Her jaw tightened. My decision. I nodded. Then I closed the folder. Claire frowned. That's it. What were you expecting? I don't know. An argument. No, Daniel. You made your decision. I stood. She looked almost offended by my calm. Then she said the sentence I would remember for years. Maybe if you had this much ambition 5 years ago, you wouldn't still be sitting in an engineering chair. Nobody breathed. I looked at the woman I had loved since I was 27. For one brief moment, I saw another Claire. Barefoot in our first apartment. Hair tied messily behind her head. Eating noodles from a paper container while I showed her the prototype that saved her father's company. She had kissed me and whispered, "One day, when this place is huge, everyone will know what you did." Funny thing about promises. Sometimes people do not break them all at once. Sometimes they erase them slowly enough that you wonder whether they were ever made. I picked up the termination folder. Goodbye, Claire. Then I walked out. No speech. No threats. No slammed door. My office took 12 minutes to empty. 2 notebooks. A photograph of my mother. A coffee mug. An old mechanical keyboard. And a silver paperweight Claire had given me after Whitmore's first profitable quarter. Engraved underneath were 5 words. Couldn't have done it without you. I stared at those words. For a second, my throat tightened. Then I placed the paperweight back on the desk. I left it there. The elevator ride to the lobby lasted 42 seconds. I counted every one. Outside, rain hammered the sidewalk. I walked 3 blocks before realizing I had forgotten my umbrella. I kept walking. Claire came home at 11:36 that night. I was sitting at the kitchen island. Her dinner was cold. She removed her coat and looked at the untouched plate. You didn't eat? No, we should talk. I looked at her. About my severance package? Her face tightened. About us. There are moments when your body understands something before your mind allows it. My stomach went cold. Claire reached into her handbag. She placed an envelope on the counter. Divorce papers. I stared at them. How long? She looked away. Daniel, how long have you been planning this? A few months. And Victor? Silence. That was my answer. I nodded once. Claire stepped closer. It didn't start the way you think. It rarely does. We were already broken. No, she looked at me. We were neglected. There's a difference. Her eyes flashed. You were never there. I was working at your company. You were hiding in engineering. I was keeping your company running. You see? This is exactly what I mean. Her voice rose. Everything becomes a sacrifice you made for me. Because most of it was. The words came out before I could stop them. Claire stared at me. Then something in her expression hardened. I need a man who wants more. That sentence hurt more than finding out about Victor. I looked around the apartment. The apartment my salary had helped pay for. The company I had helped build. The life I had postponed my own ambitions to protect. You think I don't want more? I think you're comfortable. She picked up her handbag. You could have been something extraordinary, Daniel. You chose not to. Then she walked into the bedroom and closed the door. I slept on the couch. 3 weeks later, I signed the divorce papers. I asked for almost nothing. My lawyer called me an idiot. Maybe I was. I wanted out more than I wanted revenge. 6 weeks after the divorce became final, a photograph appeared online. Claire and Victor at a charity gala. His hand rested against her waist. She wore red. She looked happy. The headline called them technology's newest power couple. I closed the laptop. My new apartment had 1 bedroom, stained hardwood floors, and a radiator that sounded like someone hitting pipes with a hammer. For the first time in 9 years, nobody needed anything from me. The silence was terrible. Then it became useful. For several weeks, I barely slept. I would wake at 3 in the morning and reach toward the other side of the bed before remembering there was nobody there. Sometimes I opened Whitmore's website and stared at photographs of people I used to work beside. Then I hated myself for doing it. So I stopped. I deleted the bookmarks. Stopped reading articles about Claire. Stopped asking Martin for updates. Stopped trying to understand why someone I had loved could reduce our entire history to a lack of ambition. One night, while unpacking an old box, I found a black notebook. On the first page was one word: Asterion. 7 years earlier, I had designed the foundation for a predictive enterprise system capable of detecting operational failures before they happened. Supply disruptions, fraud patterns, infrastructure weakness, market risk. I had imagined it as an operating nervous system for large organizations. Claire had liked the idea, but Whitmore needed other things. There was always another emergency, another product launch, another investor, another version of her future that required mine to wait. So Asterion remained a notebook. Until that night, I sat at my folding kitchen table at 10:40 p.m. I opened my laptop and started writing code. At sunrise, I was still working. For the next year, pain became routine. Wake up, coffee, code, investor calls, rejection, more code, sleep. I contacted 23 investors. 21 rejected me. One ignored every email. The last was Evelyn Shaw. Evelyn had spent 30 years investing in technology companies and had a reputation for destroying bad ideas in under 10 minutes. She gave me 20. I finished my presentation. She closed the laptop. How much? I thought I had failed. 2 million. For what percentage? 8. She leaned back. You're unemployed. Yes. You have no employees. Not yet. No customers. Not yet. And you're valuing this at $25 million? Yes. Why? Because you're investing in what it becomes, not what it looks like today. She stared at me, then smiled. 10%. 9. 9.5. Done. She extended her hand. That handshake changed my life. Our first office was above a bakery in Brooklyn. Every morning, the hallway smelled like warm bread and burnt sugar. There were 4 of us. Me, Priya Shah, a data scientist who had left Google because she hated meetings. Luis Ortega, a cybersecurity engineer who spoke about encryption like other men spoke about football. And Noah Chun, a 22-year-old developer who had dropped out of MIT. We had 6 desks and 5 chairs. The refrigerator broke during our second week. The heating broke during our third. Nobody left. Our first commercial demonstration failed. The system froze in front of 3 potential clients. I watched the screen lock at exactly the wrong moment while our largest prospect stared at me across a polished table. The old fear came back immediately. Maybe Claire had been right. Maybe I was good at helping somebody else lead, but not at leading anything myself. I walked back to the office, believing the company was finished. Priya was already there. She handed me coffee. You look terrible. We failed. No. The demo failed. They're the same thing. No, she opened her laptop. Only if we stop. So we did not stop. We rebuilt the failed module in 4 days. Noah slept on the office couch. Luis found the vulnerability that had caused the collapse. Priya rewrote the prediction layer. I called the client and asked for another meeting. They refused. I called again. They refused. On the 6th call, I said, "You already think we're incompetent. What exactly do you have to lose?" The man laughed. He gave us 15 minutes. The second demonstration worked. He became our first major client. Our second client canceled. Our third paid late. Our first investor threatened to withdraw. I spent Christmas Eve fixing a memory leak. I spent New Year's Day rewriting our forecasting engine. There were mornings when I checked the company account before checking my personal one, because keeping payroll alive mattered more than whether I could pay myself. For 9 months, I did not. We survived on belief and terrible coffee. Then Asterion worked. A logistics company used our platform to identify a supply chain vulnerability 11 days before it would have caused an estimated $80 million loss. The client sent us a one-line email. "You just paid for yourselves for the next 10 years. Priya printed it and taped it to the wall. That company told another company. Then a bank called. Then an airline. Then a government contractor. Within 18 months, we had 80 employees. Within 3 years, 700. We moved out of the bakery building, then into a larger office, then into 3 floors of a glass tower overlooking the East River. By the fifth year, Asterion Technologies was valued at $6.8 billion. My ownership made me wealthy enough that the number stopped feeling connected to reality. Business magazines wanted interviews. I declined most of them. Evelyn once asked me why. You spent years being invisible, she said. Doesn't part of you want people to know? I looked through the glass wall of my office. Hundreds of employees moved beyond it. No, why not? I finally know. She smiled. That's better. Meanwhile, I heard things about Whitmore. Not because I searched. Because eventually large companies make their problems public. Victor became COO. Claire approved 2 aggressive acquisitions. Both failed. Whitmore borrowed heavily. A government contract disappeared. The European division lost 2 major clients. Their stock fell 20%, then 30%, then 50%. At first, analysts blamed temporary market pressure. Then the language changed. Strategic concerns, liquidity constraints, leadership uncertainty. The words companies use when fear becomes public. One Tuesday morning, Evelyn entered my office carrying a folder. She dropped it on my desk. Life has a sense of humor. I opened it. Whitmore Systems. I looked up. No, you haven't read it. I know what it is. They're in trouble. How much? Serious trouble. I read. Whitmore had less than 4 months of comfortable liquidity. Debt covenants were approaching violation. 3 lenders had refused refinancing. But the company still owned valuable patents, federal infrastructure contracts, and a European distribution network Asterion needed. You want to buy them? The board does. I leaned back. Does Claire know? She knows an acquisition group approached them. Does she know it's Asterion? Yes. Does she know I control Asterion? Evelyn smiled. No, I closed the folder. Rain tapped softly against my office windows. For 1 second, I was back in that conference room. You could have been something extraordinary. Evelyn watched me. If you can't separate this from your history, we walk. I looked at the numbers again. How many employees? 3,800. If Whitmore collapses, potentially half lose their jobs. Possibly more if creditors force asset sales. I thought about engineers I used to know. Receptionists. Product managers. People raising children. People paying mortgages. People who had nothing to do with Claire. Nothing to do with Victor. Nothing to do with my divorce. Is it a good acquisition? Yes. Then make the offer. Negotiations lasted 4 months. Claire fought hard. I respected that. She rejected our first offer, then our second. She tried to bring in another investor. They walked away. Victor pushed for more borrowing. The board refused. One Friday, Whitmore missed an internal cash target by $12 million. By Monday, their lenders were demanding concessions. Debt has a way of stripping ego from negotiations. Eventually, Claire had no room left. Whitmore's board accepted. Asterion would assume major liabilities and inject enough capital to stabilize operations. In exchange, we would acquire controlling interest. One clause gave Asterion the right to appoint an executive chairman overseeing integration. The identity of that chairman remained confidential until the final board vote. Evelyn suggested the secrecy. Why? Because your ex-wife is already negotiating against a corporation. She doesn't need to start negotiating against a ghost. The final board meeting was scheduled for Friday at 10. I arrived at Whitmore Systems at 9:41. 5 years had passed since I walked out carrying a cardboard box. The lobby had changed. New furniture, new lighting, a wall-sized digital display. The marble had not. A receptionist looked up. Name, please. Daniel Reeves. She checked her screen. Her posture changed. Of course, Mr. Reeves. The board is expecting you. The elevator doors opened. I stepped inside. I did not count the seconds this time. Martin Hale was waiting on the executive floor. His hair was grayer. There were lines around his eyes that had not been there before. Daniel. Martin. He shook my hand. I always wondered what happened to you. I got busy. He smiled faintly. I noticed. He lowered his voice. You know, after you left, half the engineering division expected the place to fall apart. It didn't. No, he looked toward the conference room. Not immediately. Before he could say more, heels clicked behind us. Claire. She stopped. For several seconds, we simply looked at each other. 5 years had changed her. She was still beautiful, still elegant, but confidence no longer rested effortlessly on her shoulders. There were shadows under her eyes, a tightness at the corners of her mouth, the look of someone who had spent too many months waking up to bad numbers. Victor appeared behind her. His expression moved from surprise to amusement. Well, look who came back. Victor. Claire recovered first. What are you doing here? I have a meeting. With whom? The board. Her eyebrows drew together. Victor laughed. Consulting. I said nothing. He stepped closer. Whatever they brought you in for, don't get nostalgic. This isn't the company you remember. I know. You're standing on an executive floor now. I looked at him. I remember where it is. Claire shifted uncomfortably. Victor, enough. Then she looked at me. If this is some technical review, today is a bad day. We're closing the Asterion transaction. I know. Something changed in her face. How? Before I answered, the conference room doors opened. Arthur Bell, chairman of Whitmore's board, stepped out. He saw me. His entire expression brightened. Mr. Reeves. Good. You're here. Claire went still. Arthur walked directly past her and shook my hand. Thank you for coming. Of course. We're ready. Claire stared at him. Arthur. Yes. Why is Daniel here? Arthur looked surprised. Then almost embarrassed. They haven't told you? Her voice became quieter. Told me what? Arthur glanced at me. I said nothing. Let's go inside. Everyone took their seats. Same room. Same table. Different day. Claire sat at the head. Victor beside her. I sat near the opposite end. Several board members whispered when they saw me. Claire noticed. Her fingers tightened around her pen. Arthur stood. Before the board executes final approval of Asterion Technologies' controlling acquisition of Whitmore Systems, we must address one remaining governance matter. The screen changed. Asterion, Whitmore Integration Structure. Arthur continued. Under Section 12 of the Acquisition Agreement, Asterion has exercised its right to appoint an executive chairman to oversee integration and strategic restructuring. Victor leaned back. Yes, we know. Arthur looked at him. Good. So who is it? Arthur turned toward me. Daniel. Claire's face changed. I stood. Arthur spoke clearly. Effective immediately upon completion of this transaction, Daniel Reeves will assume the position of Executive Chairman of Whitmore Systems and Chief Integration Officer representing Asterion Technologies. Nobody moved. Claire's lips parted. Victor stared. Arthur continued. For those who are not aware, Mr. Reeves is the founder and controlling shareholder of Asterion Technologies. Claire turned pale. Not surprised. Pale. As though all the blood had left her face at once. What? Her voice was barely audible. Arthur continued. Asterion's latest private valuation places the company at approximately $9 billion. Claire looked at me. You own Asterion? 37%. The room erupted in applause. Not everyone, but enough. I walked toward the chair beside Arthur. The chair reserved for Asterion's representative. 5 years earlier, Claire had fired me from this room. Now the board had placed me above the executive team she led. Victor finally found his voice. This is ridiculous. Evelyn's voice came through the conference speaker. No, Mr. Lang. It's contractual. He stared at the speaker. She continued. Asterion is assuming more than $1 billion in liabilities and injecting the capital required to keep Whitmore solvent. Mr. Reeves' appointment was approved unanimously by our board. Victor looked at Claire. Claire was still staring at me. I sat down. Arthur nodded. The floor is yours, Daniel. I had imagined moments like this during the first year after my divorce. Not this exact meeting, but revenge. Claire seeing what I became. Victor realizing who I was. People who once looked through me being forced to listen. Back then, I imagined it would feel warm. It did not. It felt quiet. I opened my folder. Our first priority is stability. My voice filled the room. Whitmore still has exceptional engineering talent, strong intellectual property, and valuable client relationships. Asterion did not acquire this company to destroy it. People listened. We acquired it because we believe it can be repaired. Victor folded his arms. And current leadership? All executive positions will undergo performance review. Claire finally spoke. Including mine? I looked directly at her. Yes. Something moved through the room. Then I added, including mine. She blinked. This is not about history. Every decision will be based on performance, judgment, and accountability. Victor laughed bitterly. You expect anyone here to believe that? I turned toward him. I spent 5 years building a $9 billion company. Silence. I didn't do that to come back here and settle an argument. He looked away first. The meeting lasted another 2 hours. We reviewed debt, contracts, staffing, acquisition failures. When the numbers reached Victor's expansion strategy, the atmosphere changed. $600 million in losses. He blamed market conditions, then consultants, then his division heads. Finally, he blamed Claire. She slowly turned toward him. For the first time, I saw her understand something I had understood years earlier. Victor was loyal to success, not people. When success disappeared, so did loyalty. The meeting ended at 12:46. Everyone left. Claire stayed. So did I? She stared through the windows. Did you plan this? No, she turned. Don't lie to me. I'm not. You bought my company. Asterion bought a company that had assets we needed. My company. Your board sold it. That hurt. She looked down. I read about Asterion. I waited. I just never knew who founded it. I stayed private. Why? Because attention stopped being important. Her eyes met mine. I remember when it was important. So do I. Silence stretched between us. Then Claire whispered, I was wrong. 5 years earlier, I would have given almost anything to hear that. Now it sounded strangely small. She continued, You stayed because of me. Yes. You turned down California because of me. Yes. You built Whitmore's architecture. Yes. Her eyes filled with tears. And I let myself believe I did everything. I did not answer. I'm sorry. I know. That's all. What else do you want? She looked wounded. I don't know. I closed my folder. Claire, I spent years imagining you saying those words. She swallowed. And now I don't need them. That hurt her more than anger could have. She walked toward me. Daniel, I know I don't deserve anything from you. But maybe we could have dinner. Why? She stopped. To talk. We're talking. You know what I mean. Yes, I did. There had been a time when I would have crossed oceans for that invitation. Now I felt only tenderness for the man who once would have accepted. You told me once that I could have been extraordinary. Claire closed her eyes. I remember. For years, I wanted to prove you wrong. She opened them. Looks like you did. No, she frowned. I stopped needing you to be wrong. Her face crumpled slightly. That was the truth she had not expected. Revenge required her regret. Peace did not. A knock sounded. Martin opened the door. Daniel, integration team is ready. I'll be down. He left. Claire looked at me. What happens to me? Independent committee review. You're not deciding? No, why? Because I was your husband. Her eyes lowered. And Victor? Same process. You could fire him right now. I could. Why don't you? Because power isn't valuable if you only use it to satisfy yourself. She stared at me, then smiled sadly. You really did change. Yes. No, she shook her head. Maybe you didn't. I waited. Maybe I just stopped seeing who you were. 3 weeks later, Victor was terminated. The committee did not need my opinion. The numbers did it for me. Claire remained CEO under a 12-month performance mandate. Several directors wanted her removed. I opposed them. Not because I still loved her. Not because I wanted gratitude. Because she was talented. And accountability was not revenge. The first months after the acquisition were brutal. Budgets were cut. Projects were canceled. Entire departments had to justify why they existed. I spent more time at Whitmore than I expected. Sometimes, late at night, I would walk past my old office. Someone else worked there now. A young engineer named Emily. The silver paperweight was gone. Of course it was. Still, seeing that room occupied by somebody else felt strangely final. One night, Claire found me standing outside it. You kept that keyboard forever, she said. I looked at her. You remember? You complained every time IT tried to replace it. I smiled. It was a good keyboard. She almost smiled too. Then the moment passed. We learned how to work together. Carefully. Professionally. Without pretending history had disappeared. Claire changed. Quietly. She removed the private elevator privilege for executives. She suspended executive bonuses. She returned to engineering reviews. She started asking questions instead of giving speeches. One afternoon, I passed a conference room and heard a junior engineer disagree with her. I stopped. Years earlier, she would have destroyed him in front of everyone. Instead, Claire studied his data, then nodded. You're right. The engineer looked shocked. Claire smiled. I missed it. Good catch. I kept walking. That was the first time I believed regret had become something more useful than guilt. 11 months after the acquisition, Whitmore returned to profitability. Not spectacularly, but honestly. Debt fell. Customer retention improved. The engineering turnover rate dropped. The stock stabilized. At the annual shareholder meeting, Claire presented the results. I sat in the front row beside Evelyn. Claire looked different on stage now. Less polished, perhaps. More real. At the end, she paused. There is one more thing. The room quieted. Years ago, Whitmore lost one of the best builders it ever had because leadership confused visibility with value. I looked up. Claire's eyes found mine. I was responsible for that. Nobody moved. Some mistakes cost money. Others cost people. Money appears on balance sheets. She paused. People don't. No excuses. No request for forgiveness. Just truth. Then she turned back to the audience. We spent the last year repairing a company. But if we learned anything, it is that companies are not buildings, brands, or titles. They are people. And leadership that forgets that eventually pays for it. The room applauded. I did not stand. I simply watched. Not because I wanted her punished. Because for the first time in years, I could see the woman I had once loved learning to carry her own mistakes without making anyone else carry them for her. When she left the stage, our eyes met. She nodded. I nodded back. Nothing more was necessary. That evening, I walked out of Whitmore Systems alone. Spring air moved between the buildings. 5 years earlier, I had walked through those doors carrying a cardboard box in the rain. Now a black car waited at the curb. I told the driver I would walk. My phone vibrated. Priya, dinner at 8. Billionaires still need food. I laughed. Then another message appeared. Claire. I stared at her name. The message contained 7 words. You deserved better than what I gave. I stood beneath a streetlight. Once, I would have written paragraphs. I would have told her about every lonely night, every rejection. Every morning I woke wondering why the woman I loved had found me so easy to discard. I would have wanted her to understand exactly how much she hurt me. But pain stops demanding witnesses when it finally heals. I typed, I hope you're well, Claire. Then sent it. The pedestrian light changed. I crossed the street. Behind me stood the company where I had once begged, silently, to be valued. Ahead of me was the company I had built after I stopped begging. People passed without recognizing me. They did not know my net worth. They did not know that the woman who had once fired me now ran a company whose board I chaired. They did not know that 5 years earlier I had left that building believing I had lost everything. And that anonymity felt perfect. Because Claire turning pale had never been the victory. Victor losing his job was not the victory. The board announcing my position was not the victory. Even becoming a billionaire was not the victory. The victory happened in a small apartment years earlier. At a folding table. Beside a broken radiator. When a man who had spent nearly a decade building somebody else's dream opened an old notebook and decided his own dream still deserved a chance. Claire had not destroyed my future when she fired me. She had accidentally returned it. And somewhere between that conference room and the tiny office above a Brooklyn bakery, I had learned the difference between being wanted and being valued. Between sacrifice and surrender. Between proving someone wrong and finally believing in yourself. For years, I thought success would be the moment Claire looked at me and realized she had made a mistake. But when that moment finally came, I discovered something better. Her regret changed nothing. Her approval changed nothing. Her apology changed nothing. Because I was no longer the man waiting for her to tell me what I was worth. I looked back once. Sunset burned against the windows of Whitmore Systems, turning the entire building gold. Then I faced forward. I did not build Asterion to punish my ex-wife. I did not become wealthy to make her jealous. I did not return so I could sit above her at the same table where she had humiliated me. I built because building was who I had always been. I succeeded because failure finally belonged to me instead of someone else. And I returned because 3,800 employees deserved something better than becoming collateral damage in someone else's pride. Claire once told me I was not meant to lead something big. For years, those words followed me. Eventually, they stopped. Because the greatest revenge was never making her watch me succeed. It was reaching a place where I no longer needed her to watch at all. She fired me from her company. Years later, its board announced me as her new executive chairman. But the most important promotion had happened long before that meeting. It happened when I stopped living as a supporting character in someone else's ambition and finally became responsible for my own life. The man who walked out of Whitmore Systems 5 years earlier wanted recognition. The man walking through Manhattan that evening needed none. He had his company, his people, his freedom, and, finally, himself. Claire had been right about one thing. I had been capable of something extraordinary. She had simply been wrong about what was holding me back. It was never a lack of ambition. It was the years I spent believing love required me to make my own dreams smaller. Once I stopped doing that, everything changed. I disappeared into the evening crowd without looking back again. And for the first time, that felt more powerful than winning. Because the board could give me a title. Money could give me freedom. Success could give me influence. But none of them had given me the thing I had spent most of my life searching for. I had given that to myself. My worth. And once a man truly knows his worth, no wife, no company, no rejection, and no boardroom can ever fire him from it again.